How can I help you? Do you want to be pushed or do you want to be saved with this office? Which one do you want?
I have re-reviewed section 4. Yes. Make the call and I will do the rewrite.
I have made the call.
I will do the rewrite. Section 4.
I love it.
Things like good enough. Yeah, the time was good enough. It's got to go. So yes, I will do it.
Thank you.
I've done the call.
You want to respond on that mail?
Yes, sir.
And make sure you want me to push you and say, hold it. Hold it back. Okay. When you work, that's going to be fun. That we can have some time to
Ah,
Yeah, call.
but you only sent one sheet around, right? Please don't send two.
Hmm?
You didn't send both reports.
Yep. Ah, okay.
Because all right, we're going to get started. We're going to see if we find this is people on the side of the room. And we find it other room, because I just want one sheet of paper. Not 5 pieces of paper.
We need to definitely have to. We're almost done with our side. Don't please stop rushing.
Should we close this door?
Yes, close the door. That's great. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. This is the joint meeting of Tictoc and NTP. Hopefully it will be the last joint meeting and we will actually get these two working groups combined into one like they ought to be. This is first of all, I need a jabber scribe and a minute taker. Volunteers? Volunteers? I have a piece of paper up here you can write on. Pen and paper will work. What? You can use the back of this. Here's the pen. I just rough minutes. Okay, so Yakov says he can't hear me. Do any of the rest of the remote people, are they able to hear? We should be using the NTP room. Which one is this? Yeah, there's nobody in Tictoc except me, so excellent. Volume is a bit quiet, but okay. Okay. Christoph can hear. Okay, everybody else can hear fine, so hopefully it'll be fine. So we have a note taker, and we will do a community effort on scribing. This is the IETF note well. You all have seen it before. You checked the box when you registered that you have read this. Go to the next slide, please. So this is the agenda for today. We have basically the administrative and agenda bashing portion. We have the NTP portion, and then we'll have the Tictoc portion. So starting with the NTP working group agenda, we have the working group status, an update on the NTS work, an And this is where I remembered, Anshal, that I forgot to update the slides because the Mac for NTP and the open paren was I need to go back and get your last name. I remembered your first name, and I apparently forgot to do the rest of the update. So anyway, Anshal will talk to us about the Mac for NTP, data minimization, and we'll have a short discussion on the REFIT updates. Yang data model, are those guys here yet? Don't know. Oh, that's right. They're coming from deterministic networking. One of the things we did this time was we didn't list deterministic networking as a conflict, and it really should be. And so we'll fix that going forward. I think they've got scheduled on top of each other, and so there's a lot of crossover. So the Yang guys will be coming from there, and then any other business. So is there any bashing on the NTP portion of the agenda? No? Okay. So the Tictoc agenda is working group status and then the Yang data models, and then we'll have a short discussion on joint NTP Tictoc next steps. So back to the NTP working group status. You all will have seen a flurry of emails today where we did not issue calls for adoption that we were supposed to have issued after the last meeting, and they all got issued today. Or one of them got issued yesterday, I think. But anyway, in any event, so I was talking to Brian today. He's not here for this meeting, and he's not available to participate remotely. So Dennis put in the Jabber room what has happened to the BCP, and we're about to cover that, okay? So the call for adoption on the Mode 6 has been issued. There were 2 questions from Brian. So first of all, a clarification on the call for adoption, because I've seen some good comments come in on the emails that have gone out so far. One of the things I want to be clear about is commenting on when you're putting in comments for the call for adoption, I still think we need to be clear that we're planning to adopt the document. So all of those comments are great, but if you think the document should not be adopted, you need to be very clear about that. And that's what I meant by silence is going to be considered as consent. And I think some folks are being clear about that. And otherwise, it would be great if we could be a little bit clearer. So the 2 questions from Brian, one was, did anybody have an issue with the formatting? This formatting dates back to the way Dave Mills did some things. And the second question that he had was, are there any new Mode 6 commands that need to be incorporated? So does anybody have any direct feedback on that now? Otherwise, Brian will be sending this to the mailing list. I believe, Anshal, this addressed the draft that we did the call for adoption on addressed the comments that you and Sharon raised previously. The security issues were addressed by that. Okay. Okay, so Harlan would rather respond to the Mode 6 stuff via email. So that's the status of that. The second thing is the BCP. This has been around for a long time, and it's never going to be, it should be considered to a certain extent a living document because best current practices will change over time. And I think we're over-obsessing over what should be in there. So we have issued the working group last call. It's going to close on the 17th of April. That gives you about 3 weeks. I've already seen some good text come in. That's excellent. And we're planning to schedule a virtual interim the end of April, which we'll talk about later. I know Dennis is online. Dennis, did you want to comment at all on the BCP? Okay, I'm going to take silence as you have no comments. So that brings us to, well, actually, we'll stop here and do the NTS stuff. So do you want to bring up his slides? And while he's bringing up Daniel's slides, Dennis's comment in the Jabber room is to tell people to read it and tell them what they think. I think the key for the BCP is, are there obvious areas of omission or things that need to be fixed right away? And if you're going to submit that comment, you need to submit text to go with it. All right.
Should I do it?
Are you doing it or standing doing it?
I will give a short overview of the last page of the network continuity law. As the key graph, we currently focus only on the graph as
You're gonna have to be louder. Louder.
So, I will focus on we focus our work on the part using the S1 There's now part which is standalone.
Try to point that.
It, so it does not require
They're still complaining remotely. You need to be louder.
Okay.
Tap it to see if it's on. Is it on?
Now,
No. Yes, it's
Now it's working? Okay. Better. Okay.
There's a whole flurries if it's better.
Okay. Nick, can you give me the next slide? Okay. Changes from the versions 7 to 8. Daniel replaced the DTLS part with TLS for the key exchange for the mode 3 and 4 packets. We also reworked the language about non-traceability in the section objectives and privacy considerations. And Daniel also removed the option to piggyback the key exchange packets on the NTP on NTP packets. So that has been the decisions from the interim meeting in Boston last year, and this is now finalized in the draft. It's like this. To summarize the different modes, for mode 1 and 2 packets, the draft is using DTLS for the key exchange and also as to transport the NTP packets as a DTLS payload. Modes 3 and 4 packets are protected by an authentication tag in an NTS extension, which is transported over the normal NTP port. The key exchange is done via TLS. Mode 6 packets are protected like mode 1 and 2 packets. Currently, Harlan Stand plans to also want to transport mode 6 packet over TLS connection, so that might be added in the future.
Mike.
Yeah, Harlan will probably want to speak for himself in this matter, but what I hear Harlan saying is that he may want to add support for mode 6 over TCP. Doing that over with NTS support would entail then using TLS rather than TLS. But just to note that the plan I heard from Harlan was more TCP rather than TLS.
Okay. Okay. So next slide, please.
Just one quick question. Harlan says in the Jabber room that removing the piggyback option, why not leave it as an option?
We had a large discussion on that issue in Boston, and the consensus was that it is more secure to have not that many options in the draft. And yes, that was the main reason to cut down the different options to have it quite simple.
Supporting the piggyback option would also entail going back to doing the key exchange over DTLS rather than TLS. If we're piggybacking on something UDP based, then we're stuck with DTLS.
Yes, thanks.
Okay. Oh, he did go in the queue. Okay.
Oh,
Go for it. Go, Harlan.
if we're going to be supporting DTLS for modes 1 and 2, allowing a piggyback option is, I don't see where there's any extra work there. And it's certainly easy enough to use words like may instead of should or must. And that gives implementers the option of whether or not they feel like adding that complexity. This is about mechanism, not about policy. So we should give people the mechanism to do things if they want to, and then it's local policy choice whether or not they do them.
There is nothing in the specification that says you must not use some alternate transport for the key exchange. We're simply not specifying how to do it, and we're giving you, we're specifying one recommended way to do it.
We have different perspectives on that.
You have different perspectives on what's in the document, or
No, as
what
to
the-
whether,
what the consensus out of Boston was.
I don't know that it's going to be productive to have a discussion about this right now. My point is that I would rather see, it's not going to do any good to not specify these things and leave it to different implementers to decide to do this in a possibly incompatible way. In my opinion, it's better to go ahead and specify it as an option that may be implemented, and you specify how it's done so that there's
Why do you
interoperability.
want that option?
Huh?
Why do you want that option there?
What's your use case for? I think that it doesn't hurt to specify a minimum set now and add other options once clear use cases have been identified. And I think the question that's being asked is, what's the clear use case for the option you're asking to put in?
Flexibility is the obvious one. Also, if we're going to be supporting DTLS for modes 1 and 2, prohibiting it, you know, if you want to make the assumption that people would have to implement this for modes 3 and 4 as a piggyback option, unless we're talking about something different here because of key exchange.
I think that the advice from the security community would be that if you don't have a use case for an option, you should not specify it.
Yes,
Once you have a use
but
case
there's
for
a
an
difference
option-
between using this out in the evil, bad internet where there's one set of constraints, and in an internal situation where you don't have some of those constraints. So it's fine to say don't do this on the big bad internet. It's something else to say, because you can't do this on the big bad internet, we're not going to give you a clear way to implement this internally in a more friendly environment.
So I mean, perhaps this isn't a productive time to have this conversation, but my question back to you is still, what is your use case for doing it? Flexibility is not a use case. It's a condition,
Okay.
characteristic aspect. But it's not a use case. And I think what we're looking for here is, without a use case, a reason why you would want to do this, and perhaps we should not specify it yet. And once a use case becomes obvious and we understand the use case, then we can add the capability or add the option.
I submit it's probably not useful to discuss this more at this time.
Go ahead, Suresh.
So a couple of things, Suresh Krishnan, like Eddie hat on. I think it's going to be incredibly difficult to justify this, like I do this in my friendly piece, not on the bad internet, into the IESG. So this is going to like probably get hit with like discusses from all the security areas like right away when it gets there. So I don't want to go there, but even before that, like procedurally, right, Karen? So like, if you want to like close this once and for all, like do a consensus call on the list and say like, okay, like do we want to keep this or not? And if people agree, they agree. If like, or if Harlan's in the rough, Harlan's in the rough, right? Like I think that's probably one way to like just go forward from here inside the working group. But I'm just telling you already that it's going to be difficult in the IESG to like get this through a security review. I have an issue of a document right now where people kind of say like, hey, like we have this bunch of IDs, like we can pass a mobile IP. okay? And they say like, oh, this other thing is like really cool. We can use this in the future. And people are saying, why? So the document is now back in the working group, right? Saying like, okay, justify why you need this. So I see this having the same path in the IESG, okay? Saying like, so I do see a point, Harlan, but it's probably left to a point when it's needed. Like, and as like Daniel said, like it's nothing preventing, there's no must not use anything else. So I think it's really open, and we can probably write another draft which describes how this works and then take that independently in the working group.
Okay, then
Does
I
that
have
make
one
sense?
more. Yes, and I have one more question then. Are we talking about doing the DTLS transfer in extension fields over an NTP packet, or are we assuming that NTP packets are going to travel over a DTLS connection?
If you are using NTS to secure modes 1 and 2, then you will not be doing that on the NTP port. You will be doing that on a DTLS port for NTS and sending those NTP packets as application data.
How's NTP supposed to know that it's going over a secure DTLS connection?
What?
Did you not hear me?
I heard you perfectly. I don't understand the question. Why would it not know?
You're assuming a foundation. How does NTP know whether or not the packets it's sending are going over a DTLS protected connection?
Because the NTP daemon is setting up the connection.
Okay. So NTP would open up a connection on some other well-known port, and it would use that port for DTL. It would do a DTLS exchange over that port to a remote
Yes.
NTP, and that's how it would know.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next slide.
There are still some smaller issues and which has to be done yet. That's one point is for NTP servers which are using a load balancer. There has to be some language to describe how this has to be done. And then also in the security consideration sections, there's also the subset. Still the subjects section, a usage of NTP pools, which shall be reworked also.
Yeah. So on that NTP pool section. So this is carrying over from discussion from the last IETF. But I consider the current language in there simply saying you won't be able to use NTS for NTP pools. More than suboptimal if we want to push this for wide adoption, because NTP pools are what almost everybody uses. So handling the key management and public key infrastructure for servers that we trust to participate in the NTP pool is a non-trivial problem, and I don't expect a complete solution to that problem prior to publication of this draft. But I would like to at least have some discussion of what direction we're heading there, so that I can have a few relevant sentences in the security considerations section.
That would also raise the question how to establish trust in the members of a pool, wouldn't it? Okay. Next slide, please. And then there's a generic NTS draft. This one was intended to provide generic protection schemes for unicast and broadcast messages for NTP and PTP. It is currently it's somehow outdated, and but Christoph wants to continue to work on it, and he wants to make it consistent with the draft. Using NTS for NTP, and because it is quite generic, we intend to change the status to an informational draft. So that's it. Any question?
Any other questions on the status of the security work? So roughly a year ago, we put out a working group last calls on 3 documents. The CMS document has been parked. The generic NTS document is the one he was just talking about, and we're going to update that and publish it as informational. Do we have a timeline for that?
Christoph sent me email and stated that he want to submit a new version before the next IETF meeting.
Okay, so we'll have a new version before the next IETF. And then the third document is the NTS for NTP document. Do we have it? So we believe that there's just a few minor issues, one more update, and then issue a working group last call.
Yes.
And we think that'll be,
So we have an NTP interim meeting planned for sometime next April. I think the best thing to do will be to start the last call the day before that meeting.
the day before that meeting, okay. So for others for everybody else, now's a good time to read and review the document and get some comments in. We'll be doing a working group last call in anticipation of the April meeting. So do you expect a rev before that?
Yes.
Okay, so there will be another rev, and then there'll be a working group last call. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to the agenda. So the next item was the MAC document. I know you don't have slides. Do you just want to say a couple words about what the status of it is and what you think the next steps are?
There is no major changes on the MAC draft since the last IETF. We had a thumbs up from CFRG group and most of the people in this working group. And if anyone has any feedback or comments, we can make changes. Otherwise, I think it's ready to be adopted.
Okay. I do think I also created a bit of confusion on this document today. Go ahead, Suresh. And
Suresh Krishnan. So, Karen, would you like me to get like a SIGDIR review for this? Like just early SIGDIR review? I can do that if you want.
So first, let me describe the confusion that I just caused. We were trying to clean up administrative stuff on adoptions that we hadn't issued. And so I issued a call for adoption on the previous document today. And so I need to fix all of that.
No, but you can do it at any point. Like,
yeah, I know. I guess the question is, Daniel, you sent in some comments, but I don't know if you sent some comments to the mailing list about on the call for adoption. I don't know if they're if they're OBE because of what I've done, or if you think that. So my question for you is, you're the one who's commented on it. Mm-hmm. Should we pursue a SecDev review now, or do you think the document needs? Well, you actually just said it's going to change.
Yeah, on the MAC for NTP draft we're talking about. So my comments to the mailing list are that I support immediate adoption of the draft. However, in the time between adoption and when we actually push it out of the working group, I expect that the document will have to undergo a substantial change of character. From being a broad discussion of possibilities and alternatives and trade-offs to actually being a specification for using AES CMAC for legacy Mac.
And this is where I caused the confusion, because the link to the document you saw is the one that she did with all of the options and discussion, but the actual one that has been adopted is the specification.
Oh, I guess I must have read the wrong version then.
You absolutely did, and it's all my fault because I pushed the wrong buttons in the data tracker. So if you just take a quick look at the working group, the already adopted working group document, it's very short, that does an actual recommendation. I think then you're right, Suresh, we could get a sector review of this.
Yeah, so what I'm trying to avoid is like, we get this thing late, right? Like, so the earlier in the process, like if you can, because like, especially I'm doing this for security related stuff in like, I'm just trying to get the, like, bad news if there's any early, right? Like, so, and if people clear it, because you talk to CFRG, so,
Right.
and SecDir is like something that will clear the way, like for the SecADs, like at some point when it gets there. So I think it's really good if you can do that. So just like, I'll wait for you to signal me some way and then.
Right. I just need to send out an email straightening out the mess that I created earlier today, but we have, I think we have adopted a document. We think it's ready to go. All right. Next issue is the data minimization. Did you want to talk briefly about that, please?
Yeah, so all the updates that I have on this document since the last IETF meeting are what has transpired in the past 16 hours. There's been a push for, we've put out the call for adoption. A few people have commented on it. I've responded to those comments. Harlan, so far I've heard nobody stating opposition to adoption. As far as the revising the content of the document, Harlan had a few comments that he wanted some musts changed to may. I responded that maybe should is the right thing there. And then he also wanted a section on randomization removed, which I currently don't see a reason for, and I've replied on the list asking for clarification on the reasons.
Okay. So to go back to my early clarifying statement, on these calls for adoption, you're welcome to send in comments, but if you're, okay, so your hand is up. Oh, your hand is up. I'm sorry, Harlan. There we go.
Hi there. As written, I believe if the purpose of this document is to do exactly what it says, then it does exactly what it says. I think it's overreach, and that's why I want those shoulds or shalls changed to mays, because that behavior is inappropriate in various contexts, and prohibiting that behavior is counterproductive. Paul Gear had a comment about a wider use case of why doing this behavior will make it more difficult to find operational problems in the wild. As for the third paragraph of the randomization, I'm pretty sure my original comments say exactly what they're supposed to while I remain polite. So again, that third paragraph should go because it's exactly for the reasons why I mentioned.
Anyway, so on the first point, do you have any objection to changing those musts to shoulds? And on the second point, you've stated that the paragraph is, I believe, incomplete, inaccurate, and inflammatory.
Yes.
I'm unclear on what justifies any of those three statements. What is missing? What is inaccurate? And which statements do you find inflammatory? And how would you temper them?
I'm not about to do that with you in public.
Okay, so let's go back to the first point. Harlan, are you opposed to the adoption of this draft?
With the current language, yes.
Are you opposed to a draft that addresses these issues?
No.
Are there any other drafts on the table that addresses these issues?
No.
So
Not that I'm aware of.
Is this a reasonable starting point that we can move forward with?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then you are not opposed to the adoption of this draft.
Wait a second.
And you have
I'm opposed to the draft as written.
Right, but I said, are you?
I'm not
ahead,
opposed
Sarah.
to the conceptual purpose, and with the changes I offered, I'm perfectly happy with it.
Suresh Krishnan. So Harlan, like I hear what you're saying, and I understood this like as supporting adoption, right? So once the document gets adopted, it goes under working group change control. So it's not like Daniel making the changes anymore. It's like the working group making changes. So at that point, once it's adopted, like you are as much as a party to it as like Daniel, right? Like, and you're free to argue the changes in the draft, right? So,
Okay.
so that is the process, right? Adoption means like, does the working group want to work on this problem, not whether this is going to be the end result of the whatever document comes out. So is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so at this point, I think we can take the discussion of whether the language should be should, must, or may to the mailing list, and perhaps we will try to craft a conversation at the interim to deal with the second issue. I would encourage you, Harlan, to you can't say something is incomplete. You need to say what's missing. So we need to be a little bit more
Okay,
detailed.
for starters,
Uh,
you want me to not do that now?
Well, you don't need to do it now. I mean,
I'm
do you?
happy to do it later or in email.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be now, but it has to be somewhere in public for the working group to review. This is not a
Fair
personal
enough.
issue. This is an issue.
Right. So, yeah, so written. would be
Fair
great.
enough.
Thank you. Okay. So the next item I have on the list, we don't actually have any updates on. Harlan, this is the ref ID document that you and Sharon did, and I didn't get a chance to follow up with either of you on where we are with this. And I don't know if Sharon, I don't think Sharon's actually, I know she has a issue.
I'm not aware of any changes to the documents that we think need to be made.
So we believe that this one is ready to progress.
I believe so.
Okay, so we could ostensibly do a working group last call on this one. So the next item is the Yang data modules. Are the, oh, here he comes. Did you have it?
Hi, I'm Dhruv. This is the first time I'm in the NTP working group. I was recruited by other authors to come and like join this effort because I have some Yang models under my belt. And when I was started, I actually coded a bit of NTP, the auto key features when I was just an implementer. So kind of combining the two experience and trying to write and up. Basically, the Yang model was already there, finding out what are the issues in the Yang model and making sure that it gets moving. So I think Anil was the one who presented this some IETF ago. And the main updates I will just go through and what are the next steps that we have in mind with respect to this Yang model.
Oh, yeah, but we haven't actually put it in.
Perfect. So this Yang model, what does this do? It's basically a way for us to manage the NTP, both the client side as well as the server side. It has the mechanism to configure as well as to get the real-time state. Most of the features for NTP4 are covered. AutoKey was something that we recently added. It's incomplete as of now. There are still some changes needed to be done there. There is a new author, Yizo from Ericsson, and this is just a new edition before the IETF. So I will be publishing a new version later based on the inputs and other things as well. Okay. Oh, I need to do that. So what are the changes? We made sure that we could change the port because this is some feature that some of the vendors have where they allow the NTP port to change to a non-standard port if needed. So that configuration is allowed. Earlier in the document, we were having a mechanism for only a single trusted key. So that has changed to a list. A container for AutoKey has been added. So we need to make sure that to keep enhancing the authentication part. A little bit of structure has changed. I have a slide on that. I will talk about how we are handling the association type and the interface container that we have, the list of NTP interfaces. How are we handling the manycast kind of feature? Those things we are adding here. So this is a straightforward thing, allow you to configure the NTP port. By default, the NTP port is always there, but you are allowed to change to non-standard. This we have to take care of the security considerations as well, so we will make sure to handle that part as well. Okay, this way. So what's the next change? The next change is the earlier this was just a single container, but the star would mean that it's a list now. So we have changed it to a trusted key and maintaining key ID. Actually, there is recent work in the RTGWG as well about the keychain handling. So we in the next update, we will make sure that we use the RTGWG model and keep it aligned. A container for auto key also has been added. Right now, we are using the crypt hash here. We have to still figure it out, which is the right reference that we need to use, and whether it should be the RTGWG one or whether we have to use the netmod one. So that discussions I'm having with some people during this IETF, and we will clarify that. This is regarding association type. So earlier, there were different containers, so that we have simplified by having an association type, and you can use association list, define the association type as either server, peer, and pool based on the different NTP modes, and then manage this association. And an auto key container has also been added. With respect to interface, again, some reorganizations have been done. Basically, we combine broadcast, multicast server together rather than maintaining it separate as per the NTP mode 5. And AutoKey and the Manycast client and Manycast server related details have been added. We still plan to reorganize this a little bit based on the some ideas from the Yang best practices, which we are planning to do it in the next update. So if I remember during the last ITF, I think one question what Anil asked was that is this something that the NTP working group wants to do? Coming from the vendor side, we think that we are using Yang models for most of our protocols and for configuring of our devices as well as for the manageability things. So we feel that NTP fits into that definition, and this could be another way for you to configure NTP and enhance the manageability part of NTP. And we were hoping that this time we could get adopted and then work and keep updating the document under the umbrella of the working group rather than as a private draft. Thank you.
Are there any questions?
Suresh Krishnan channeling Danny Meyer on Meet Echo. He says remove auto key. So would you like to elaborate a bit, Danny?
He decided that. What?
Oh, sorry, he's in the queue. Wait, hey, Danny, you need to start over because I didn't push the button.
Auto key
So go for
because
it.
this working group has already decided that auto key is very badly broken and needs to be replaced. So doing anything with auto key right now in your Yang model is a waste of time and resources.
Okay. Thanks for the input.
Okay. Thank you, Danny. Harlan?
Hi there. Oh, good. There we are. Yeah, so with that in mind, this means we also need to add NTS in there. The other trick is there any working suitably licensed software that demonstrates this implementation?
I didn't understand what you meant by that.
Has anybody implemented this yet?
Okay, so we have currently we have a proprietary version of our Yang, and as you know, bunch of vendors already are using Netcon for configuring NTP and other CLIs and other stuff. So our aim to coming to IETF and doing this so not using our proprietary Yang models anymore, coming to the IETF, standardizing those Yang models, and once that work is done, we will implement those. Right now, it's based on a proprietary version. We're coming to the IETF, making changes, and once those changes are standardized, we have to go back to our vendors and implement those Yang models. So if you are asking this model in its current form is completely implemented, no, but parts of it are implemented.
Okay, well, there's two issues here. One is the Yang model itself. The other is the code to implement the monitoring and control functions?
That's basically netconf and restconf. So that's definitely already there. We are just writing the Yang models and using the existing protocols. This is going to work. So there's no need for extra functions at the netconf and the restconf place, or any other monitoring tool that can use Yang models.
Okay, there's a bunch of glue missing.
Okay, so would you like to like us to add a little bit more information of how a Yang model is used?
No, if it's
So,
appropriate, I'd like to get an email from folks and start participating and working with you guys.
Okay, that's more than welcome.
Harlan, this is Richard. Like, would you like me to take a shot at this? Because I think I understand what you're saying. So I'll take a shot at it.
Please.
Okay. So there's like NTP implementations, right? Okay. So there needs to be something between like setting some variable, like using Yang. You said something using the Yang model, but something needs to happen to activate that in the implementation. I think that's the question Harlan was asking about. Is there like an open source implementation? Does that make sense? Like, I think that poses questions, not the actual Yang model itself. Like, what is the connectivity between the what's done using the Yang model and what happens in like a NTP implementation?
Okay, so if I'm a device and I am implementing this Yang model, I'm going to use the protocols like netconf and restconf to receive the data in form of XML in case if it is netconf, or if in case of restconf, it will be in JSON format. So based on the Yang format, I will receive the data. I would have a general Yang parser, which can parse any XML data based on a Yang file. This kind of code for mostly for all vendors is already generic. It's not dependent on a particular Yang model. So we write it in a generic way. And moment you support a Yang file, there are tools like, for example, if you look at Open Daylight, there are Yang tools that can generate the parsers automatically. So we usually use that kind of auto-generated tool. So that's why this kind of manageability works very easily. And if there is an update to a Yang file or a revision to a Yang file, the glue code is quite easy to update. It's not a big problem. And usually this is something that is already defined and already working for rest of the other Yang models. It's not something NTP Yang specific.
Okay, two questions. First, I will say that I'm not very familiar with the Yang model at all. Are there transactions capabilities with this?
Yes.
Okay. Next, at some point, we've got to find a way to take the Yang data transmission so that we know what configuration needs to happen, and that needs to be translated into something that queries or manages an NTP instance.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Harlan.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Hi, Harlan. Jared Mach.
Howdy.
Hi. Can we take this part of the discussion offline? I could maybe show you some Yang models and how they interact with some platforms.
Perfect.
I think that might help you understand it a little bit better. Thanks.
Thank you.
So there's also a question from Yakov online. Does this replace NTPQ?
Well, there's no aim for replacing anything. It's just another tool.
No. Okay. So Yakov, the answer is no. All right. Is there anybody opposed to the working group adopting this work? No. All right. So I will properly issue a call for adoption on the mailing list.
Thank you.
And so the last thing that I listed was any other business. We sort of have dropped all of the, there was a number of drafts related to the extension fields. And
When are we going to talk about those? Or when are we going to move forward with them?
that was what I was just getting ready to talk about.
Wow, you're awesome.
So there was, I mean, there are a number of drafts, and we had talked about combining some of them. Harlan, do you want to? So there's none of the extension drafts have currently been adopted. Do you want to summarize what each of them are again, or how do
Somebody
we?
can give me a list. Or I can go look for a list.
Go to go to Data Tracker to the NTP working group. Look at the bottom where it says document.
Jared, I'm wondering if it would be best if we
The,
issued call for adoption for those on the list as opposed to trying to adjudicate them all here.
we could do that. There's been a fair amount of discussion on a few of them. The other thing is we could tee up and properly prepare for this conversation at the April interim.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, let's just do that because I'm still confused about the number of drafts and what we really want to get out of it.
Okay.
All right. All right. So that brings us to the end of the NTP agenda. And so now TikTok. So there's 2 items on the TikTok agenda. The first one is the working group. Oh, here it is. Oops. There we go. Working group status. So the first thing is we actually have a new RFC. I know he's here, but he's not. He's over in the deterministic networking working group. But TILE's multipath time synchronization has been published as of January. It's RFC 8039. So that's a big step forward for that. The second thing is we actually have the 1588 MIB in the RFC editor queue. And with deep thanks to Suresh and the document editor's patience, we have got that moved forward. The enterprise profile, PTP enterprise profile, it had completed a working group last call, and then in conversations with Doug Arnold, who is at an ITU meeting this week and not here, it completed the working group last call, but there were some updates that we wanted to make based on some changes that have happened in 1588. So the IEEE 1588 document has completed its first working group ballot, and so we need to get an author update on that one, and so we'll do an author update, and then we will reissue a very short working group last call because it has been around for a while. And then the last thing is the 1588 over MPLS. This has been sitting in our docket for a while, awaiting an editor update, and we don't have that editor update. Oh, Harlan's in the queue again. Hold on. Sorry, Harlan. Go ahead. I need the queue over here. Go ahead, Harlan.
Maybe it's me in the queue.
Oh, Yakov's in the queue.
Yeah, you're so used to having Harlan in the queue.
Yeah, I pushed it.
Yeah, just about the 1588 over MPLS one. I think at this point, it is the right thing to do to drop it, since the draft which came afterwards, which is more generic, I remember Greg Mirsky's draft actually passed working group last call in the MPLS working group.
Right. And this one was going to be experimental in any event, so I think that we shall drop it. Anything else? Okay, I'm booting you out, Yakov. Harlan?
Hi there. So at some point, I'd like to discuss how we want the documents to look moving forward. This goes to things like, do we want to have separate proposals for like each extension field thing? Do we want to have clumps of extension field proposals, or do we want to do something like have higher level, have high level documents that describe each thing, and then we augment them as we make changes for things? Did that make sense?
So, it does make sense. We had talked in Boston about a set of groupings.
Okay. Yeah, but that was like, so now we have the ref ID proposals that has like 2 or 3 ref ID proposals in it, but there's a bunch of other extension field ones. And then there's the issue of how we've separated the MAC processing from something else with extension fields. And we've got the hilarity that we have not yet discussed about the proposal I hate, and I propose some changes to. And you know, the question is, how do we want to do this moving forward? Do we want to go through it in chunks, or do we want to have some, you know, add this to the section, add this to the section of 59 or whatever, you know, to add some new fields under extension fields, or the same thing will probably be true with mode 6 moving forward.
So I think that there's probably a little bit of homework and organization that we need to do to have this conversation productively. And I'd like to have, I know Sharon was involved in some, but I'd kind of like to have her there as well. And also, I know that there is an ongoing disagreement between you and Tal on the clarification to the extension field that was made.
Oh,
so
please, let's not focus on Tal. I have disagreements with Danny about this too.
I realize there's an ongoing disagreement. I think there are several issues, and in order to have a productive conversation, we need to have the conversation a little bit more organized, and we don't have all the parties in the room, and we might as well. I don't think it's effective, given the amount of time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
We've gone in circles on this. I'm tired of going in circles. I don't want to have the conversation until we get all of the key participants in the room together.
I wasn't expecting to. My point goes toward, if we're going to work toward an April interim meeting where we discuss these things, it's going to help if it will help if we can get a decision or about the overall direction we want to proceed. So are we looking at, you know, submitting clumps of new RFCs to add in different proposals, or are we looking at updating an existing RFC so that you know, when a time comes to add a new extension field, we add a new section to the existing document under supported extension fields?
So you think it would be helpful to have a single document on extension fields and to rev it every time a new extension field is defined?
Either that, or let the single protocol document have a section on extension fields and rev that every time. I just personally, I don't like the hunt of, you know, look at the top and see all the different places where somebody may have done something, and then every time I go to look at it, go through each one of those again to see if it's been revved. I'd rather have a single place to look for these things.
So you think that we need to do a rev of the base core, the base NTP specification?
That would be my preference, but that's my preference.
That's not the least bit terrifying. I think we should probably.
There's good and bad sides on each of these, and that's why I wanted to discuss it.
All right. Right. So is there anybody in the room that has an opinion on any of this?
I oppose any approach which would treat the set of extensions as closed. The entire idea of having extension fields is that you can simply register your extension and maintain that document separately from everything else, that we don't have to rev the core stack, and leave open the possibility of extensions in the private use range, where if you see this and you don't recognize it, you ignore it.
That's already done. If you don't recognize an extension field, you ignore it. But if you're going to make something an extension field and you got to document it, huh?
Right. So that's not the point, but.
Yeah. So if something is not in the private use range, then nobody here is proposing that we use it and leave it undocumented. But I oppose the idea of a of a single directory that gives us a point of truth as to aside from the IANA registry, which I think is the directory you're interested in. And when you see a rev of one of the, you can either look at that, which should point to the latest rev, or you can just watch the list traffic for when something is updated.
Okay.
But I think requiring us to put everything into a single document defeats the point of extensions altogether.
Okay, we clearly disagree on this one.
So I'm not, I guess I'm not convinced that I can provide you at this point in time the guidance on how to do this. I think revving the core spec every time is not the way we want to go. I think perhaps a single document related to all of the extension field types of issues and the definition of new extension fields could potentially be done. The other thing to think about is I think there are other things people have suggested changing to the core specification, and we haven't opened that up to do that.
Hi, Rich Sauls. Yeah, I understand trying to track down everything can be frustrating, but you just make sure the RFC number is in the registry. And then you look at one spot and then it's a table of contents to where to go everywhere else. I think opening up the main doc would be really bad. You want something stable. And trying to collect all of the extensions into one spot is also counterintuitive to the way everything else goes in the app here.
Okay. So I think one or a small set of drafts is the guidance that we're getting.
Okay.
All right. I think combining, I don't think we need a separate draft for every extension field. So
Thank you.
where we can coalesce them, that would be better. But I don't, as Rich says, I don't think we should rev the base specification. All right. So I'm pushing the red button, Harlan. You're going out of the queue. Okay. So that brings us to the end of, so we were on actually the Tictoc stuff. And are the authors of the Tictoc, the 1588 Yang module here? Can you bring up that, download the slides for the Yang module for? Mm-hmm. Please stand by. Got it. Okay, I'm just going, as soon as this comes up, so I don't see the editors of this document in here anywhere. So, so this is basically a Yang module that's the corollary to the MIB module that we just talked about that's now in the RFC editors queue. If you go to the next slide. And this is the hierarchy that they've defined. If you go to the next slide. And these are the summary of the changes. And there is an open source module for this. It's available on GitHub. Go to the next slide. Here's the next steps. This work is being, so one of the authors at the top that you noted was Rodney Cummings, and Rodney Cummings is heavily involved in the IEEE 1588 work. And the current revision of IEEE 1588 is looking at the definition of data sets that would support whatever the underlying management model would be. Because in the case of 1588, you have the S&P based management, you have Yang, and then there's also native management within 1588. Oh, and he's here. I'm just crucifying your presentation so you can come. Yeah, I knew. Yeah, so why don't you, I was just telling them that the update was there, so you'd be better off. You probably don't need to go over that, but you can go to the next steps and talk about.
Yalong Jiang from Huawei. This is the newest update to the 1588 Yang module. This is the hierarchy of this module. It's almost the same, but we enlarged the scope of the instance number to accommodate for 1 million instances. Next. Yeah. So for this version, mostly it's editorial one, but we reconstructed the whole module to simplify its structure. We introduced several new types, such as the clock class, clock accuracy such things, and also several new types of emulation, just to remove all the redundancy in different modules and other minor things. Next. Thank you. The newest module is also uploaded to the GitHub site. It's totally available in public, so it's encouraged to use them and feedback anything that's a problem. Just as in the mailing list, we've been discussing that maybe a new leaf interface should be added. So it will be very convenient if you need to look into what is the underlying physical port, for example, for the 1588 logical port. So for the next revision, we will add this reference. I think this version is quite stable now, so we will solicit lots of call for this draft as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, just one quick question. The additions, do you have a time frame for when you want to put those additions in? You want to do that prior to the last call?
I think maybe a week or 2 weeks.
Okay. So we will wait for the update from you, and then we will issue the working group last call.
Yeah.
And you're still closely coordinated with Rodney and the 1588 community. Okay. And the lessons learned in the 1588 MIB, we will also apply to this as far as getting the proper.
Yeah.
And Rodney knows what those are, so we'll take care of that.
We
so.
are still in good relationship. To,
Yes.
cooperate.
All right. Any other questions on the MIB, on the Yang module? Nope.
No.
All right.
Thank all of you.
Yes. Reviews would be helpful. Thank you. And when we do the working group last call, we will also send it out to the 1588 community. We will probably wait just a tiny bit so that they can finish their own working group ballot process. So just so that we're at the end. Next slide. Okay. So there was some talk about having a side meeting on security this week. Folks that are interested in that side meeting, if you could come to the front of the room at the end, we can talk about when and where to protectively do that. There's been a little bit of discussion on the mailing list today about a virtual interim. I think what we proved between the last meeting and this meeting is that this is a working group that is a little bit more effective if we do have the occasional virtual interim in between. So we are currently targeting having 2 virtual interims between now and the next meeting in Prague. We're looking at late April for the first one, and then late May or very early June for the second one. And I've proposed some April dates on the mailing list, so if people could take a quick look at that. Given the time zones that we cover, there's not a lot of wiggle room for the time, but at least the dates we can do. And the third item is I've said this before, we really need to do the administrative work to combine these 2 working groups into one and recharter. And I have solicited the help of a former IESG member to help get this charter work done, and he has agreed. So look for draft rechartering text on the 2 mailing lists. The intention is to combine the 2 working groups into a single one that does time protocol work in the IETF, because it is a very small community. All right. With that, I give you back 48 minutes of your day. Thank you all. And I need the blue sheet. Oh, if you haven't signed the blue sheet, please do so. And that's not the blue sheet.
I only said kind of. It really goes this way. It was clipped in. I could move the stake. The co-chair. Yes, page 1. Page 2, and the back is page 3. I did just say some slides. I did actually draw a picture of a rat. It's on page 3. Now on page 2. Tictoc. And then I said rat. Back to the attention games. We drew a picture of a rat.